Hello and welcome to another video from the Aspiring Medics. If you're new here, my name is Arisma and I'm now a third year medical student at King's College London. In this video, we're going to be taking you through the decision making section of the UCAT exam, and we're going to be doing a walkthrough of sorts. So taking you through the different types of questions and giving you tips and strategies to answer these questions as fast as possible. But before we get into the video, make sure to check out our channel and subscribe because we post weekly videos to help you ace your med school application. So without further ado, let's get into the video. First, let's look at what the decision making section is all about. So as the name suggests, this section assesses your ability to make sound judgments and decisions when presented with complex information. This section is 31 minutes long, and in this time you have to answer 29 questions. Now, some of the skills that this section assesses you on are your ability to apply logic to make decisions, your ability to evaluate arguments, and your ability to analyze statistics. Next, what are the types of questions that you will encounter during this section? Now, of course, there isn't an official list on the UCAT website, but we at the Aspiring Medics thought it to be effective to group the decision-making questions into these 4 categories. So the first one is syllogisms, where you draw conclusions from given information. So you're given some information called premises, and then you're asked questions about it. Is the conclusion true or false? Or they could ask you what the conclusion is in the first place. Next are logical puzzles, where you use deductive reasoning to reach a conclusion. Again, you have lots of information similar to syllogisms, but you have to use deductive reasoning to reach the conclusion. Next, we have analyzing arguments, where you decide which argument is the strongest. And the last type of questions is statistics, where you analyze Venn diagrams, and these are probability related questions. So just really all the math stuff relating to the decision making section. So let's get into our first question type, which is syllogisms, where you draw conclusions from given information. So let's look at our first example question. All the people who live in the house except for Jim like tea. More than one person in the house likes coffee. Place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. And you have 5 statements here. This is not a multiple choice question. You have 5 statements, and you need to drag and drop a yes or no for each of these statements based on the information or premise that you're given. And the premise that you're given is all the people who live in the house except for Jim like tea, and more than one person in the house likes coffee. So first, what I would do in any decision making question is to synthesize and consolidate the information you've been given. The decision making section is known for using very tricky language and for just trying to confuse you. So instead, what you should do is take a minute to truly understand what the question is asking you and what the information actually means. So what I've done is made a list of things that we do know. So first of all, we know that Jim does not like tea. Everyone else in the house likes tea, and we got that from the first sentence of the premise. We also know that 2 or more people like coffee, and we don't know if Jim likes coffee. So now, keeping all of that information in mind, let's decide if each of these statements are true or false. So, Jim likes coffee? No, we're not sure of that. So in this question, a yes is when you're sure of something, a no is either if that's false or if you're not sure of what the answer is. And we don't know what Jim likes, so this would be false. If a person in the house does not like coffee, they must like tea. Again, we're not sure about this. This might be false. Third, if a person in this house does not like tea, it must be Jim. This we're sure about because, as you can see, the first statement in the what do we know section is that Jim does not like tea. Fourth, if only 2 people in the house like coffee, one must be Jim. Again, we don't know this because if you look at the 4th statement, we don't know if Jim likes coffee. And lastly, someone in the house likes coffee and tea. Of course, this is true because everyone in the house apart from Jim likes tea, and 2 or more people in the house like coffee. So this is the most effective way to go about this question, in my opinion. Synthesize the information, make a list of the things that you know, because the question itself is going to be really confusing. Now let's try another question. If you want to try this on your own, make sure to pause the video right now, write down your answers, and then get back to the video after you're done. So this question states that all aspects of a business are either manageable or unmanageable. None of the unmanageable aspects of the business are related to finance or technology, and employee satisfaction is a manageable aspect of the business. And again, they've given us 5 statements, and we have to decide if they're true or false. So again, what do we know? First of all, we know that there are manageable and unmanageable aspects of a business, and all the aspects of a business are either manageable or unmanageable. Then they've said that finance and technology are not unmanageable, and since all the aspects are either manageable or unmanageable, finance and technology must be manageable aspects. And third, they've told us that employee satisfaction is a manageable aspect. So this is everything that we know. Now again, using this information, let's answer the questions. So first, some aspects of the business are manageable. Yes, we know that. That is true. Employee satisfaction is the only manageable aspect of the business. This is false because we also know that finance and technology are manageable aspects as well. All aspects of the business related to finance or technology are unmanageable. That's false. We just said that those two aspects are manageable. All unmanageable aspects of the business are related to neither finance nor technology. That is true because both of them are manageable aspects of the business. Some aspects of the business that are manageable are aspects other than finance and technology. That is also true. So we hope that these tips have helped you realize how to go about syllogisms. The only tricky part of the decision-making section is that the words are tricky, the sentences are convoluted. But once you get past that point, once you can understand what they're saying, the questions are actually really, really easy. So, moving on to our next question type, which is logical puzzles, where you use deductive reasoning to reach a conclusion. Let's look at our first sample question. 5 tourists from different countries, China, Italy, Germany, France, and America, wore shirts and hats of different colors: blue, green, brown, yellow, and red. No 2 tourists wore hats and shirts of the same color. The French tourist wore a green shirt, her hat was neither red nor blue. The American tourist wore a red shirt, the Italian tourist wore a brown hat, and the color of their shirt was the same as the color of the French tourist's hat. Now, when you read this for the first time, it is super confusing. There is so much information just thrown at you, you don't even know where to begin. And what is the question asking you? Which of the following statements is true? By reading this information just once, I know absolutely nothing about who is wearing what shirt or what hat. And so this question actually seems really intimidating at first, but we're going to give you a top tip to make this question less intimidating and very easy to solve. So what we're going to do is break up this information into chunks. Let's look at the first sentence first. So 5 tourists from different countries, China, Italy, Germany, France, and America, wore shirts and hats of different colors, and no 2 tourists wore hats and shirts of the same color. So what have I done with this information? I've simply created a table. So I have all of the tourists here, and then I've put their shirt colors here, and then their hat colors below that. So I've literally just made a table so I can synthesize this information and make more sense of it. And you can do this in the exam as well using your drawing board. This is the single most useful tip I have ever used to solve this type of question, i.e. the logical puzzles, and you're bound to come across around 2 or 3 of them in your exams. So the next statement is the French tourist wore a green shirt and her hat was neither red nor blue. So let's fill that in the table. You can see that the French tourist here is wearing the green shirt. Wherever we've put grey, that means that that is not a possibility and purple is the possibility. So the French tourist is wearing a green shirt, so we've marked that as purple. And they've also said that her hat was neither red nor blue, so we've marked those as grey. Now, why have I put everything else as grey as well? That's because another statement in the question stated that no 2 tourists wore hats and shirts of the same color. So if the French tourist is wearing a green shirt, none of the other tourists will be wearing a green shirt. Also, if the French tourist is wearing a green shirt, he obviously is not wearing shirts of other colors, and that's why I've grayed out these other boxes as well. The next statement is that the American tourist wore a red shirt. So again, I filled in the table and the American tourist is wearing a red shirt. I've crossed out all the other colors for the American tourist because obviously they're only going to be wearing one shirt. And I've crossed out red for all of the other tourists because remember, no 2 tourists wore the same color shirt or hat. The next statement is that the Italian tourist wore a brown hat. So again, I filled that into the table and crossed out everything else. The color of the Italian tourist's shirt, was the same as the color of the French tourist's hat. Now this is a bit of a tricky one. So again, I've put the table on the screen. What are the possibilities of the Italian tourist's shirt's color? It could be blue, brown, or yellow. And this shirt color was the same as the color of the French tourist's hat. Now, what are the possibilities of the French tourist's hat's colors? Green or yellow? What do we see in common between these three colors and these two colors? The only common color is yellow, and so I've marked that. The French tourist is wearing a yellow hat and the Italian tourist is wearing a yellow shirt, and I've then crossed out everything else. And this is the state of our final table after we've gone through all the statements in the question. So again, I've just synthesized the information into words. What do we know? The Chinese tourist is either wearing a blue or brown shirt and a blue, green, or red hat. The Italian tourist is wearing a yellow shirt and a brown hat. The German tourist is wearing a blue or brown shirt and a blue, green, or red hat. The French tourist is wearing a green shirt with a yellow hat, and the American tourist is wearing a red shirt with a blue, green, or red hat. Now remember, we still don't have all of the information at this point. We still don't know what color shirt or hat the Chinese tourist is wearing or anything like that, but we've used up all of the information that we've been given in the question, and we've synthesized it and we've converted it to a table. Now let's look at the options for the question. A, the Italian tourist wore a red shirt. That's false because we know they were wearing a yellow shirt. B, the American tourist wore a red hat. Again, that's false. They wore a red shirt. We're not sure about the color of their hat. C, the American tourist wore a yellow hat. Again, false. We don't know what the color of their hat is, and yellow is not even one of those options. And D, the Chinese tourist wore a blue or brown shirt. Now that is true because we have that right here. So the correct answer to this question is D. The Chinese tourist wore a blue or brown shirt. Now let's do our second sample question. Again, if you want to attempt this yourself, make sure to pause the video now and get back to it once you've written down your answers so you can check if you were right. So our second question is, Kane, Nancy, Nicole, and Sandra went on a holiday. Each participated in one of the following beach activities: jet skiing, scuba diving, sea walk, or snorkeling. And the rates for these activities were $30, $40, $65, and $75, not in any order. And then they've given us some more information that I'm not going to read out right now. And the question is, who paid $75 for their activity? So again, let's synthesize information. Let's create a table. So based on this basic information that they've given us, which is the fact that they went on holiday and they participated in the following beach activities, and then we also have the prices of these activities, I've made a table based on that. So I have their names here, I have the prices of the activities here, and then the names of the activities themselves here. So let's look at our first statement. So Kane did not spend the highest amount on his activity, but he spent $10 more than Nicole. So what I first did is crossed out 75 for Kane because that is the highest amount. So he did not spend $75 on his activity. However, we do know that he spent $10 more than Nicole. So that means that the difference between the amount that Nicole spent and Kane spent was $10. And the only two prices that are $10 apart are $30 and $40. So from that, I've concluded that Nicole spent $30 and Kane, like the question suggested, spent $40, so $10 more than Nicole. And then after that, I've crossed out everything else because if Kane has spent $40, he is not spending any of the other amounts, and no one else is spending $40 either. Next, Nancy did not participate in jet skiing, but her activity cost less than Sandra's activity. So I've put a grey for Nancy for jet skiing because she did not participate in it, and we know that her activity cost less than Sandra's activity. Now, if you looked at the table previously, all we knew was that Nicole spent $30 and Kane spent $40. The two other options for prices were $65 and $75, and we know that Nancy's activity cost less than Sandra's, so surely that must mean that Nancy spent $65 on her activity and Sandra spent $75. So we actually have all of the prices there right now. Now, if you were smart, you would have looked at the actual final question and the answer choices already, and you would have realized that they're only asking you about who spent how much money, not about the activities that each person was doing. So honestly, at this point, we could stop making our table and answer the question, but for completeness, I'm going to complete this table with the rest of the information that the question is giving us. So next, we also know that Nicole opted for snorkeling and Kane did not select sea walk as his beach activity. So I've put Nicole down for snorkeling, crossed out all the other things, and I've grayed out sea walk for Kane. So what do we know? Kane spent $40 and is doing jet skiing or scuba diving. Nancy spent $65 and is doing scuba diving or the sea walk. Nicole spent $30 on snorkeling. And Sandra spent $75 either on jet skiing, scuba diving or the sea walk. And the question is, who paid $75 for the activity? And the answer is obviously Sandra. Moving on to our third question type, analyzing arguments, where you have to decide which argument is the strongest. So let's look at our first sample question. In order to improve children's health, should fast food shops be banned from selling junk food to children at lunchtime during school terms? And we have 4 options, 2 yes arguments and 2 no arguments. Now, before we even read these arguments, these answer choices, you need to ask yourself some questions when you're looking at these answer choices. First, does the argument directly link to the question? Second, is the argument objective or unbiased? Third, does the argument cite evidence? And fourth, can you find any loopholes in the argument? If you go through this checklist while doing these questions in the decision making section, you're bound to find the correct answer very easily. So let's look at the 4 answer choices. Yes, junk food is a major cause of obesity and poor health in children. So it is related to the question because it is talking about the health of children. And this may reduce their ability to benefit from education in the afternoon. So it is relevant. And the argument does seem to be objective and unbiased. Now, not every argument will cite evidence, and that's okay. That's just an optional question. But going on to the 4th question of our checklist, I don't see any loopholes in this argument. So A looks like a very strong argument. But let's go through the other answer choices and see if there is a stronger argument than this answer choice. So B says that yes, children who leave school to visit junk food shops at lunchtime will be unsupervised and are likely to be a nuisance in the neighborhood. Although this argument does make sense, that the children will be unsupervised and could potentially be a nuisance in the neighborhood, this is not at all relevant to the health of children, and therefore this is not the answer. So let's move on to option C, which says that no, this will reduce the number of customers fast food shops have and may very well put the owners out of business, increasing unemployment. Now again, while this argument may be true, it is not at all relevant to the health of children and is therefore not the correct answer. And D, no, lunchtimes are too short, and if children can't get home for lunch, it is important that there is somewhere that they can go for cheap food. Again, not at all relevant to the question, not at all relevant to children's health, and therefore not the correct answer. So the correct answer to this question is A. So let's move on to our second question, which asks if society would be safer if urban areas had designated dog walking areas where pets could be exercised without causing danger to people. Again, ask yourself the same questions and go through this checklist. If you want to attempt this question on your own, make sure to pause the video right now and ask yourself these questions in the checklist and then get back to the video to check if your answer was correct. So option A says, yes, it is better for dogs that live in towns to be exercised in separate areas where they cannot frighten people and leave waste that can be harmful to children. This is very relevant and directly related to the question because the question is talking about exercising pets in a place where they aren't a danger to people. So they are addressing the fact that pets can be a danger to people, so they should be exercised in separate areas to prevent that, to prevent frightening people and to prevent leaving waste that could be harmful to people. Option B is, yes, it is important that dogs are properly exercised and ideally they should be allowed to be free to run off the lead without restriction. Now, while again this argument may be true, it's not relevant to the question because the question is focusing on the safety of people, not the freedom of pets to run around wherever they want. So I don't think the answer is B. C, no, it is the responsibility of dog owners and not local councils to find somewhere to exercise dogs safely away from people and dangerous traffic. Now again, while this may be true, this is not what the question is asking you. The question is asking if society would be safer. They're not asking you to decide whose responsibility it is to get these dogs to exercise in separate areas. They're just asking if dogs exercising in separate areas would lead to a safer society. So again, while this argument may be true, it is not relevant to this question. And option D is, no, towns and built-up areas are already overcrowded and any undeveloped land should be used to provide new houses rather than playgrounds for pets. Again, while this may be true, it is not relevant to the question because it's talking about overcrowding and not having the space to exercise dogs. whereas the question is just asking if it would be safer if dogs were just exercised somewhere else. So again, this is not relevant to the question, so the correct answer is A. So our biggest tip for this section is to get this checklist of questions and to ask yourself these questions while going through the answer choices, and that's how you'll really identify what the correct answer is really quickly. And another really common thing that you'll see in this type of question is that all the 4 options are actually true. So for example, it is important that dogs are properly exercised and should be able to run freely wherever they want, and it is true that there is overcrowding in towns and stuff. So all of these arguments are true. However, not all of them are directly related to the question, and not all of them are relevant, and that is how you will identify the correct answer. So we hope that that helped. And now finally, moving on to our last type of question, which is statistics, where you analyze Venn diagrams and you have probability based questions. So let's look at our first question. This diagram gives information about the football teams a number of people had watched, and you have this Venn diagram. And based on the diagram, you need to decide which of these statements is true. So what we're going to do is go through each of the answer choices and calculate and see if the answer choice is correct. So option A, more people watched City than did not watch City. So for this, what we need to do is calculate the number of people who watched City. So this is the Venn diagram for City. So you need to add 6, 7, 12, and 8, which gives you 33. And then you need to calculate the number of people who did not watch City. So what I did instead is find the total number of people in this Venn diagram, because that seems like a calculation that will be useful in future questions or in future answer choices. So I calculated the total by adding 13, 14, 5, 2, and 33, which is the total number of people who watched City, which is 67, and therefore the number of people who did not watch City is the total 67 minus the number of people who did watch City, which is 33, and so the number of people who did not watch City is 34. So more people watched City than did not watch City. That is a false answer, because more people did not watch City by 1. The next answer choice is fewer people watched City than watched United. So the number of people who watched City is 33, and we know that from the previous option. And the number of people who watched United, again, this is the Venn diagram for United, so let's add it up. 14 plus 5 plus 12 plus 7, which is 38. So B is actually the correct answer. In the exam, once you found the correct answer, I would recommend moving on to the next question, because obviously you know that this exam is very time intensive. However, for completeness, we will look at all of the other answer choices in this walkthrough. Option C states that 15 people watched neither the Rovers nor United. So to find out how many people watched neither of them, we have to look at all the numbers outside these two circles. So that's 6 plus 13, which is 19, which is obviously not equal to 15, and therefore C is not the correct answer. Finally, option D, the number of people who watched City was less than half the number who watched United or Rovers. So from the previous option, we know that the number of people who watched City was 33, and the number of people who watched United or Rovers is the OR rule. So you add up all the probabilities. So that's 14 plus 5 plus 7 plus 12 plus 2 plus 8, which gives you 48, and the half of 48 is 24, and therefore the number of people that watched City was not less than half the number of people who watched United or Rovers, and therefore D is not the correct answer either. So our next question is a bit of a wordy one, but let's go through it. So a youth orchestra of 39 members is drawn from 4 secondary schools, K, L, M, and N. Each school sends the same proportion of boys and girls to play in the orchestra as are on its school roll. With 18 members in the orchestra, School L is twice the size of K, 3 times the size of M, and 3 times the size of N. N has as many boys as K has girls, while M has equal girls and boys, and L has as many boys as K, and there are 6 girls from N in the orchestra. So this question reminds me a lot of the logical puzzle, because reading this information, I understand nothing at the moment. I don't know what is going on. I don't know what the question is asking me. I don't know what to make I don't know how to make sense of things. But the question is asking us how many of the 4 secondary schools are same-sex schools. So right now I'm completely blank, and when you are completely blank, as we've been mentioning throughout the video, synthesize information, make tables, make a list of things that you know, and so on, so that you truly understand what the question is telling you to do. It's exactly what I did. I created a table. So we know that there are 4 schools, K, L, M, and N, and we know that the total number of students in this orchestra are 39. We now know that there are 18 members in the orchestra from school L, so I've put that there. We also know that school L is twice the size of K, so K has to be 9. It is 3 times the size of M and N, so 18 divided by 3 is 6, so I've put that information there as well. The next statement is that there are 6 girls from N in the orchestra, so I've put that there, and because there are only 6 total students from school N in the orchestra, that must mean that there are 0 boys in the orchestra from school N. The next statement is that N has as many boys as K has girls, and N has 0 boys, which means that K has 0 girls, and therefore is sending 9 boys to the orchestra. Next, M has equal girls and boys, so because it had 6 total students, that means it has 3 boys and 3 girls. And lastly, L has as many boys as K. So K has 9 boys, so I've put that down for L as well, and that means the number of girls from L are 18 minus 9, which is 9. So going back to our question, how many of the 4 secondary schools are same-sex schools? I've crossed out L and M because they are co-ed schools, so the answer is K and N, which is 2. The third question is based on probability, so again, pause if you want to solve this yourself and you can come back for the explanation and the correct answer. So Jason is playing a game with 2 dice. Dice A has numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 and 8, and dice B has the numbers 2, 6, 3, 5, 7 and 9. A person can select any one of the following games to play. Game 1 is where you roll both the dice and you win if they both show even numbers, whereas game 2 is where you roll both the dice and you win if they both show odd numbers. So the person who selects game 1 has a better chance of winning the game. Yes or no, and they've given you 4 options, so we need to see what the correct answer is. Let's analyze both of the games. So game 1 requires you to get an even number on both the dice. So the chance of getting an even number on dice A, how many even numbers does dice A have? 2, 4, 6 and 8. So the chance of getting an even number on dice A is 4 by 6. And the chance of getting an even number on dice B is 2 by 6, because the only even numbers on dice B are 2 and 6. So the chance of getting an even number on both is the AND rule in probability, and the AND rule requires you to multiply the probabilities. So 4 by 6 multiplied by 2 by 6, which gives you 2 over 9. Now let's look at game 2. Game 2 requires you to get an odd number on both the dice. The chance of getting an odd number on dice A is 2 over 6, because the only odd numbers are 3 and 1. And the chance of getting an odd number on dice B is 4 and 6, because the odd numbers on dice B are 3, 5, 7 and 9. So the chance of getting an odd number on both, again using the AND rule, is 2 over 6 multiplied by 4 over 6, which gives you 2 over 9. And therefore, the chances of winning both games are equal. This statement is false. So let's look at the 2 no arguments. No, a person has the same chance of winning irrespective of the game they select, which is the correct answer. The other no option was no, the person who selects game 2 has a higher chance of winning, which is false. They have an equal chance, and therefore the correct answer is C. Finally, our last question of the day. Bill has a biased dice. The probability that when he throws the dice, it lands on a 6 is Q. He throws the dice 10 times and gets 10 sixes. Will the probability that the dice land on a 6 on the 11th throw still be Q? So this doesn't actually require you to do any calculations. This question simply requires you to know the theory behind probability, and to just know what probability is, and to know some basic concepts. So again, pause here if you need to choose the correct answer, and then you can come back to check if you were right. So the correct answer is A, because probability does not change with the number of times you throw a dice. It is always the same. So the answer is yes, as the previous throws have no effect on the outcome on the 11th throw. Finally, I just wanted to end with some top tips for the decision making section. So first off, it is to synthesize information, make tables, make a list of things that you know. Do anything to understand what the question is giving you in terms of information so that you can answer the questions more effectively. I would also say revise GCSE math, especially with the probability questions, knowing the theory and concepts behind probability and then being able to solve them. Also, Venn diagrams come up a lot. Third is to use the drawing board either to synthesize your information, make tables, or write down calculations that you think might be useful in the future. Fourth is to not use your own knowledge. You would have seen this in the analyzing argument section. As I'd mentioned before, almost all of the arguments are actually true, but you don't need to use your own information. You need to look at what is true with regards to that question, what is relevant to that question. Even with the syllogism questions, for example, imagine a syllogism question tells you that the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. You know that's false, but if that comes up as a statement, as a true or false statement, you will use the information given to you in the question and not the actual truth that you know, that is that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Our next tip is to be strategic. We've given you a quick introduction of all the different question types in the decision making section, and I'm sure you would have been solving these questions on your own as well. If you particularly struggle with certain questions, I would say practice them a lot before the exam, but during the exam, if they're taking up too much time, if you know you're going to get them wrong, if you're really struggling with them, skip those question types. Remember that each question is weighted equally in the exam, so finish the questions that you're sure you're going to get right before attempting questions that are tricky or that you struggle with. And obviously, our last tip is to practice, because only practice will make you perfect and will help improve your score in any of the UCAT sections. And practice will also help you manage your time better, because this exam is very intensive on time. So with that, we've reached the end of the video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you found the video useful, and comment down below what video you'd like to see next. See you in the next one.